Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to office hours for December 11th, 2024. Let me just get more organized here. Okay. A little housekeeping. If you want to submit a question, there's a Q&A chat bubble to do that. You can ask questions anonymously, but if you want your name, organization, or region associated with your question, you'll need to type it in the your name box. The team will read questions after the presentation and will provide answers if possible. And as a reminder, all questions will be saved and recorded as part of the public record. As a reminder, the office hours session scheduled on December 25th, 2024 will be canceled for obvious reasons. This will conclude our office hours series for calendar year 2024. If you would like to continue attending office hours, it's really important that you re-register for the 2025 webinar series at the link below. And Mike dropped it in the chat as well. Thank you, Mike. And the next office hours session will be held on January 8th, 2025. Did you know, helpful hint, grantees may request to change the due date of their financial reports as a one-time change or an ongoing change. And for this slide, I'll give the podium to Susan.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. We have had a lot of questions about the planning applications for the 2024 currently open application submission period. So when we get several questions, we like to try to, in office hours, kind of provide a little more clarity. So I wanted to just present to you kind of how this is working. So we do recognize that small communities have limited funds to get projects going. So we have made some determinations internally to try to help folks be able to do projects that are much needed in your smaller communities. So with planning grants, we have two different options for planning grants this time around. If you're just doing a normal, everyday true planning grant, that you will use the 20A matrix code in your application. This kind of planning grant is used for, feasibility studies, things like do you even need it in your community? You can look at what the environmental may look like. Do you have the property for it? Is it something that's possible to do? So feasibility studies would be included in that. You can complete the NEPA documents and complete that portion of it to get that out of the way. The national objective, in order to meet a national objective for the true 20A matrix code planning grant, is the documentation of whether the project is feasible. And that would be, the studies, the things you did for that documentation is how folks can meet a national objective with the planning grant. The second option that we have is planning related to another activity. So for this kind of planning grant, you would use the 20A asterisk matrix code, which is in part of the application. For this type of planning grant, you do need to demonstrate a minimum of 2 funding sources. It can't just be CDBG because of course, there's no guarantee of future CDBG award. So you can list CDBG as one of the funding sources, and general jurisdiction funds can be listed, but we need at least a minimum of 2 funding sources for this type of planning grant. For this type of planning grant, your jurisdiction would also need to meet a national objective within 6 years of the first drawdown on the 20A matrix code planning grant. So meeting that national objective is completing the project. Under this type of planning grant, you will be required to submit quarterly activity reports until the national objective is met. We can certainly discuss what the process will look like for that. We have a solicitation that would allow for completing those activity reports even after the grant, the 28th asterisk matrix code grant, is closed out. So one of the things, the way that this would work is you would apply for a 28 asterisk matrix code in the application itself, and then that will prompt another code for the project, like a O3K or whatever the project that you ultimately plan to construct will be. You would enter that code as well. And again, to be clear, you will need to meet that national objective within 6 years of the first draw on this 20A grant. And you will need to continue with activity reports to achieve the national objective, which is happens with completing the ultimate project that you're going for. So for that kind of grant, the second planning related to another activity, this is for things like um, bid ready plans and specs, engineering, architecture, design costs, that sort of thing. So really the goal is to first ensure that your project is feasible, and then we can do the second type of planning grant to get those things in play, kind of pre-project development stuff. And now with that second planning related to another activity, it is required that you get HCD approval on your feasibility. And we've streamlined that. So the way that you do that is to send an email to the unit inbox email. If someone could drop that in the chat too, please. That will probably be helpful. You would send an email and say that you're interested in doing a planning related to another activity. Say, we want to do plans and specs or something like that. And then our team will reply to you with some questions that you'll need to answer and a little bit more information, and in order to give you the feasibility approval for the planning related to another activity grant. So I just wanted to personally present this and hope to provide some more clarity. If you have questions about it, you certainly can put it in the Q&A, and we will try to answer here at the end. But likely, because project specific things are difficult to answer in this type of forum, your best bet would be to just send an email to the unit inbox, and we can give you a project specific kind of comprehensive answer on what might be needed if that's your interest. So hopefully that's helpful for folks. We really wanted to give some good clarity there. And yes, I can already answer, Jose. Thank you for that question. Your 20A matrix code without the asterisk does not require a feasibility approval, because that planning grant is for the feasibility studies and ensuring that this project is something that you could do in the first place. So hopefully that's helpful, and I will pass it back to Tanner. Thanks again for entertaining that clarification.
Thanks, Susan. Appreciate it. Next slide will be covered by Jeannie.
Thanks, Tanner. Before I go over the next slide real quick, just as a reminder, it is the department's policy not to have AI in the AI transcript spots in our meetings. So if you are attending, if you have AI bots attending this meeting, please sign them out, or else we will need to remove them from the meeting. Thank you. What's new? GMM updates. We have created a new completion report for 20A planning grants only. We've realized that the completion report that we have been using did not collect all the necessary demographic information, or just all information, any information for planning grants that IDIS requires. So if you do, or if you are closing out a planning grant, please use the completion report marked for matrix code 20A planning grants. It is up on our website. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie. And this next slide will be covered by Mike Phillips.
Thank you, Tanner. Good morning, everyone. Just to give everyone, all of our CDBG CV grantees, a reminder that ICF grant administrators will continue checking for threshold items before approving each financial report. These are things like updated debarments, environmental review records, subrecipient agreements, and so on. And the purpose for this is it significantly helps with audit preparedness and will streamline the monitoring and closeout of CDBG CV awards. We're currently closing out like 60 awards, and in the next 6 months, I think we're going to be closing out another 150 to 200 awards. So we're going to be processing a lot of closeout. So this will really, being on top of the threshold items, will really help close out our grants a lot faster with you. And you can proactively work with your GAs to address threshold document issues before submitting your next financial report. So this doesn't slow down your reimbursement process. You know, if your debarments are expiring or something, you can just send them to your GA, and that way it won't, like I said, hold up your reimbursements. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mike. All right. So now we are going to go over the questions from our last office hours. Is there a current CDBG local government advisory committee working with HCD? If so, what jurisdictions are on the committee and how does the jurisdiction apply to be on the committee? While we do not have a local advisory committee during the consolidated plan process, HCD reaches out to jurisdictions and local communities to obtain views on needs and priorities for HUD funding. There were activities that occurred this year. Please send your interest to the CDBG inbox and we will forward to staff. Under the legislative information for sub-applications being submitted in November or December, should the applicant supply the current or the newly elected legislators? Please enter the newly elected legislators as letters go to the newly elected. Excuse me. How will HCD verify that we have viewed the recordings of the NOFA webinars? Is it just the honor system? Yes, it is the honor system. There is a certification box within the application that certifies that you reviewed the recordings. 20 CFR 57207B13 states in general that the purchase of equipment, fixtures, motor vehicles is generally ineligible. However, it can be allowed if necessary for a public service or program that's integral to the facility. Would the purchase of a delivery van for a senior meals delivery program be allowed and meet this exception? Equipment is eligible if it is integral to the services being provided under a public service. With senior meals delivering the meals to clients is an integral part of the activity. Please make sure that you go through the federal procurement process and track any expenditures if this is what you're pursuing. Question: purchase of equipment would have been for an OTC project though, correct? Purchase of equipment that is integral to the provision of a public service still must be under a public service application. The only eligible equipment purchase under OTC is for fire station equipment. Is the correct email address to send questions cdbg@hcd.ca.gov? And yes, it is. It's also in our chat right now. Do you anticipate letting the jurisdictions who applied for OTC know if their application made it in before the funds were exhausted? We do not currently have an ETA. We will keep you posted and updated during our office hours. Will you be providing training on the updates to 200 CFR? We are still going through the changes in 2 CFR 200 as it applies to all federal programs. Once we have more information, we will let everyone know during office hours. What is considered activity initiation under milestones in the application and in CDBG contracts? Activity initiation will be program or project dependent as each award is unique and at a different phase in the process. Examples of activity initiation could be going to bid, releasing an IFB, or client intake. Is there any anticipation of updating income certification guidelines? If you can provide more specifics on your question, we can further assist you. We currently have resources on income certification in our GMM. Right. You can now submit your questions and we will go over them. And just a special note, happy holidays, and we hope you have a wonderful new year. All right. Brandy asks, is the two funding sources for full funding? And this is related to planning. Susan.
Sure. Thank you, Brandy, for your question. The two fundings, you just have to show that you have funding available for the project itself. That you don't have to have two different funding sources that provide funding for the entire project itself. So it's pretty much similar to how we do it already now, that we would want, sources and uses that show at least two funding sources that will be contributed to the project. Of course, it is always better if you have another full funding source, because of course we can't guarantee that you would get CDBG funding to complete the full project. So that's really what we want you to be thinking about here, is how would you be able to meet that national objective and construct the project if you did not get a CDBG award. So it's something to think about, but is not required that you have two full funding sources for the project outside of CDBG. Hopefully that gives you some clarification. Thank you for your question, Brandy.
Brandy asked another question. Will this planning be the same for 2025 NOFA? Susan?
Sure, thank you for that question. I do not have an answer for you as far as the 2025 NOFA just yet. I would encourage you to participate in review of the annual action plan that should be coming out early next year. That has general information of what will be going on in the 2025 NOFA, but at this time, I can't confirm or guarantee that this planning would be the same for 2025. So I would just watch for that annual action plan and see what you see in there regarding any of those nuances. And as soon as we know what will come out for 2025, we'll do a listening session so we can kind of give everyone a heads up of what's coming down the pike. So thanks again for that question.
Thank you, Susan. Stephen Abramson asks, can you include construction plans and architecture drawings as part of project feasibility for a planning grant? Susan?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I appreciate you bringing that up. Actually, for a true planning grant, which is the 20A without the asterisk, their bid ready plans and specs are not allowable per CFR code. So that's why we kind of have come up with this creative way to sort of help you be able to get your plans and specs and architecture drawings and that sort of thing. But that's going to be using the 20A asterisk code instead, so that we don't, we got to stay compliant too with the CFR regulations from HUD. So this is kind of our workaround to try to help smaller communities that have limited funds for their pre-development costs. So the long answer short is no, our plans and specs are not allowable as part of a feasibility planning grant. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Susan. Lori Adams asks, hi, do you have an update on OTC that you can share with us? Susan?
Sure, I'll take that one too. I wish we did. Unfortunately, we do not have an update on the OTCs, other than I can assure you that we are in the process of reviewing and making sure thresholds are met and that sort of a thing. But when we do have an update on those, we will share it with you very timely. So because we know that your jurisdictions are counting on knowing what you're going to be able to do coming up. So we're going as fast as we can. We'll get you an update as soon as we have one, but I would not anticipate it before the first of the year. So thanks for that question, Lori. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Susan. Lori Adams asks, hello, for the 50% rule, is it all money combined that is at 50% correct, or per contract based on the type of program? Jeannie?
Thank you for your question, Lori. The 50% rule is by solicitation type. So you must have, for instance, you must have expended 50% of all active planning grants in order to apply for another planning grant, or you must have expended all or 50% of all active public service grants in order to apply for another public service grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Brandy asks, so there needs to be one full funding source besides CDBG? Jeannie?
Hi, Brandy. So hopefully I can provide a little more clarification on this regarding the funding source for planning grants. It's the idea behind it is to make sure that you guys have considered funding the whole project, whether it's you have multiple funding sources, one funding source, just you need to be able to, one, actually construct the project, so pay for the entire project, and two, not a CDBG cannot be the only funding source. So in case you guys aren't awarded, another CDBG fund the following year or whenever you guys are ready. If CDBG would cover the entire project, you do still need to list out another one, and when you do need to ensure that you guys have enough funds to complete the project. So hopefully that provided a little more clarity. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off what Jeannie said, thank you, Jeannie, for that synopsis. The thing we're trying to avoid is a potential payback situation. We don't want you to, rely solely on CDBG funds to complete the project within the 6 years. If you do that, you run the risk of not meeting a national objective, and we do not want anyone, we don't want the money back. We want that money out in the community. So we will work with you and do the best we can with helping you identify other funding sources. There might be some in other, agencies that might be able to, depending on your project. So, but that's really the goal here, is to be able to assist you while still remaining compliant for us and for jurisdictions. So thanks, Jeannie, for that. That was great breakdown.
Right. Thank you both. To follow up, Lori asks, to follow up on previous discussions in the past, are you anticipating a new system for the next round of CDBG applications? Jeannie.
Hi, Lily. Thank you for your question. I have not heard anything new as of now regarding the next round of applications. As soon as we hear more, we will, of course, announce it during office hours. You guys will be the first to know. We just unfortunately have not heard anything, especially with the holidays coming around right now. It's even slower to get information. So unfortunately, no update. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Jeannie. Anonymous attendee asks, if an agency has unused CDBG CV funding, can they still use them? Is anyone out there currently reallocating funds to activities with CDBG CV?
I can try to take this one, Tanner. Let's see. So if I'm understanding your question correctly. So we did the CDBG CV unclaimed funds opportunity where we kind of encumbered all of the remaining CDBG CV funds in construction contracts with documented cost overruns. And so to date, we have encumbered everything that we had. All of the unclaimed funds and all of the funds that we've disencumbered to date, we've allocated to projects. So right now we don't have any unused CDBG CV funding. If you're going to be disencumbering funds, I don't know that we could redeploy those funds since the overall CDBG CV deadline is June 2020, June was June 30th, 2026. I don't know if we could redeploy the funds that quickly. So, but yeah, let's talk offline if you want to. You can send me an email and we see what we might be able to do. But yeah, that's the plan so far was to encumber everything into the unclaimed funds requests, and we don't have any funds remaining. So yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Anonymous attendee asks, so for planning code 20A asterisk, a feasibility study has to be approved by HCD. Did I hear that right? Susan.
Yeah, thank you for this question, Anonymous. I probably didn't make that super clear. If you already have a feasibility studies that you have done, then we would want you to upload that in order to do a planning code 20A asterisk grant application. But if you have not already done feasibility studies and you don't have any of that documentation, then yes, you would want to send an email to the unit email that's in the chat and request feasibility approval from HCD in order to apply. So there's the two ways you can go. If you've already done feasibility studies and you have that documentation, that will suffice. If you have not, then please do quickly as possible send your send an email to the unit email, and we will work with you to get that feasibility approval.
Thank you, Susan. Brandy asks, for the new action plan, can we recommend that planning for construction and construction be in the same grant as it used to be several years ago, or is there something in federal code preventing that, Susan?
Sure. Thank you, Brandy. I really appreciate all these clarification questions on this. For the annual action plan, you may recommend anything that you would like. If you have a comment, we do have an open public comment period that will be coming once the annual action plan comes out. So stay tuned to be able to give your comments. I will say one of the reasons we're doing this workaround is because we do recognize that, you know, the smaller communities have very limited pre-development funds and that sort of thing. And there is a federal code preventing being able to do bid ready plans and specs in a planning grant. So that's kind of why we have this workaround. But absolutely, you can recommend that. And I do encourage folks to, you know, let us know what you need so that we can try to find these sort of creative ways to get it to you.
And
So
can
hopefully that
add
helps.
on to, can I add on to what you're saying, Susan? Action plan and any comments that you'd like to make to the 2025, 2026 document. Be on the lookout for it. It'll drop next March, and we will give you advance notice so that you can make comments within that 30-day period. Thanks.
Thank you, Crystal.
All right. Thank you both. Appreciate it. Brandy asks, so there needs to be a match for future OTC construction grants? Susan.
Sure, good question. Yeah, this does not apply. We do not have a match. A match is not going to happen. Kind of bouncing off what Jeannie said earlier, what we're looking for is to make sure that jurisdictions have considered the fact that doing this planning related to another activity 20A asterisk grant, that you'll be able to do those things, but it's actually going to be under the subsequent matrix code that is project related. So we do need to, we just want folks to be thinking about how you will meet that national objective within 6 years by constructing the project if you do not get awarded CDBG funds. So there's no match for future, and it does not, it doesn't apply to other construction grants. It only applies to if you have been awarded a 20A asterisk grant, it's actually going to be associated with the subsequent matrix code, and you have 6 years to construct. So we want to make sure that you're thinking about how you may fund that, because there's obviously no guarantee that you would receive a CDBG award to be able to construct it. So no match. We're not doing matches. There's no match with CDBG through HCD. But hopefully that gives a little more clarity of what we're going for here. We just want to see that you've thought about other funding sources for that particular one. Now, any other construction grants that you're doing, it's not associated to the 6-year construction. It's just business as usual, getting it constructed within the performance period of the grant itself. So hopefully that helps. Thank you, Brandy, for asking those questions.
Thanks, Susan. Anonymous attendee asks, what would need to be included in a feasibility study, Susan?
Sure, good question. So whatever you think that HCD could be able to ascertain that you have done the feasibility studies. So if you want further clarification on what exactly we're looking for, you know, that's going to be case by case basis. Feel free to send an email to the unit inbox and ask if your particular one is helpful, or if you still need to answer the questions that we would be asking to give feasibility approval. And we're happy to kind of give you some more case by case direction on that. But, you know, feasibility studies can be, you know, that you've gone out to the community and realized that it's something that's needed. You know, I can give you an example. If you're trying to do, you know, say a homeowner assistance program, and you don't have home inventory, you don't have any homes, then, you know, it's not really feasible to be doing that sort of a thing. So that's just kind of a simplified what we're looking for. So if you have questions on whether what you have for documentation is acceptable, I recommend you send that to the inbox and we can give you a little more direction. So thanks for that question, Anonymous.
Thanks, Susan. Anonymous asks, without feasibility approval, we cannot apply for the code 20A asterisk, correct, Susan?
Sure, I can take that too. You know, of course, you're welcome to apply. It's just if we can't ascertain feasibility for this 20A asterisk code, then, you know,
Susan,
oh yeah, sure, go ahead,
I'm so
Jeannie.
sorry. I'm going to jump in right here. There is a application question for the 20A asterisk to upload an authorization letter from the department. So you will be unable to upload a document into there if you have not received authorization.
Yeah, perfect. Good point on that. Thank you, Jeannie.
All right, thank you both. Bridget asks, I'm catching this conversation late, but when I go to the matrix code categories document on the solicitation page, there isn't a 20A asterisk in definition of what that is, only 20A. Do you plan on updating that?
I can take this one. Sorry about that. Um, Unfortunately, the matrix code category document came out a bit later, or sorry, earlier than we did the 20A asterisk. We can, however, the matrix code document that is posted into the solicitation does not have descriptions of and or definitions of what the matrix codes are. It's more for what's considered OTC, what's considered planning, what's considered competitive. So I don't believe it will be of much assistance, even if it is updated. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Brandy asks, would master plans with outreach from the community for infrastructure projects be considered a feasibility study?
I can
Jeannie.
take this one. Thank you, Tanner. The master plans, as in the plans, the actual design and specs, anything to do with architectural designs, plans, specs is not, even if it is in conjunction with a feasibility, cannot be applied for under 20A. If it has anything to do with actually getting any designs or specs, engineering stuff, cost estimates, things like that, it must be within the 20A asterisk.
Thank you, Jeannie. Jose asks, for a 20A application, no asterisk, under accomplishment metrics, there is a measure indicator to be selected. People, jobs, households, housing units, businesses, public facilities. My question is people the correct choice? And a follow-up is that would the LMC national object, what would be the LMC national objective? Family size and income, presumed benefit, or nature and location?
I can try taking a stab at this question. Thank you, Jose, for your question. So in terms of measure indicators, you would choose the measure indicator as applicable to the project. Those are all the available choices that HUD gives us in order on how to measure your accomplishments, and you would choose the appropriate one depending on what your project or your application is, what the actual plan is for. And then my question about people's LMC national objective. I'm not quite sure what your question is regarding the LMC national objective. If you can provide a little more clarity, that'd be great. Thank you.
Jeannie, I believe he's asking which option, because we ask how they're
Oh,
qualifying for LMC.
okay. If which option, again, that's based on your application. However, whatever it is that you guys are studying or what your plans are for would determine which one you would answer or which one you would select. Thank you, Tanner.
Thanks, Jeannie. Anonymous asks, if we intended to apply for bid-ready plans for 30% engineering and right-of-way, I'm guessing that would not be approved because we only get 30% plans, correct? Or would that be okay if we build out 30% in 6 years? Susan.
Sure. I'm a little bit unclear on the question, but if you were planning to maybe do phases of a project, perhaps, um, we have done that, but I'm not positive. Honestly, I would say perhaps it might be better to send this question to the unit inbox so we can get a little more details on what you're talking about doing. But it sounds like you want to do 30% grant, like maybe a phase one on something. And that is something that we've done in the past. But without getting a little more specific information, I don't know that I can give a good comprehensive answer. So recommend that you reach out to the unit inbox and we'll see what we can answer. And keep in mind, please, that we are not allowed to answer certain project specific questions, but we'll do the best that we can because the application submission period is already open. But we will try to get you a better comprehensive if you can give us a little more specifics.
Thanks, Susan. Brandy clarifies not full plans and specs, but concept design for the master plan. Or may concept design for the master plan. I think this is in connection with her question regarding if master plans are covered under feasibility. And just for clarity for all of us, master plans are typically just a planning of a system, such as a storm drain system or a water delivery system or sewer system. Doesn't typically have plans and specs.
Thank you, Tanner. I'm gonna jump in real quick here. Master plans are allowed under 20A, no asterisk. Again, like Tanner, if bouncing off of Tanner, when there are no actual designs and specs for project specific stuff, specific site locations, that is, and true master plans, then true master plans are allowed under a planning grant. Now, when we're getting into designs and specs for a specific location, that's when it is not considered a planning, like a true planning grant.
Thank you, Jeannie. And thank you, Brandy, for clarifying. Lori comments to piggyback on the 30% plans. This is required to study a project and is not considered full plans relevant to a planning grant with an asterisk. I believe, Lori, please correct me, but you're saying that to build plans out at least 30% will give jurisdictions an idea if a project is actually feasible. And then Anonymous says, correct, this is a phased plan. So I think we were on the right track. Yeah, Lori says, correct. Yeah. I'm struggling to synthesize this into a question that we can answer, but perhaps it'd be good if please email the inbox and we can provide a more in-depth response if possible. Anonymous asks, can concept designs be included for feasibility and construction estimates? This would be critical to determine overall project feasibility, Code 20A. Susan.
Sure. Yeah. Concept designs are, what we're looking for when it comes to the true planning grant with the feasibility. We're looking for folks to that's the part where you figure out where it might be located and what it might look like. We just can't do the bid ready plans and specs in a true planning grant, the 20A without the asterisk. So it sounds like you're on the right track for getting, concept designs are not plans and specs. So that should fall under the 20A. I think you're on the right track with that.
Thank you, Susan. Anonymous asks, what are your thoughts on Lori's 30% to make projects feasible? So I think the question is, would a plans and specs built out to 30% or graded to 30% be allowable under 20A to determine feasibility? Susan?
Yeah, I think Lori's been trying to clarify that also. Yeah, if you're only going to do 30% of the plans and specs to make a project feasible, that is under the code allowable under a 20A. It's when you start getting up to 90% or more of those being completed that now we've run into non-compliance with the code. So yes, to make you could do a true planning grant 20A that gets you 30% as part of the phase.
Thank you, Susan. I think we may have answered that question to their satisfaction, it sounds like. So I appreciate everyone's clarification and answers on that one. Thank you, Anonymous. Anonymous asks, are construction budget estimate costs also allowed under Code 20A? This is important for project feasibility. Susan.
Susan,
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Jeannie. You can jump
Susan,
in.
you can. I was just gonna say, I don't think we have an answer on this yet, and once we do, we can get back to you on this.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Thanks, Jeannie.
Thank you both. That was our last question, but I'll give it just a few more moments for any other questions to come in.
Yeah, well, we're waiting on any additional questions. I did want to say it is important if you do have these kinds of questions, especially as we're coming up on the deadline, to send those to the unit inbox. If we cannot answer them because the submission period is open, we will let you know. But it never hurts to, send your questions over there because sometimes we can answer them. And one of the reasons that we're going over all of this planning grant clarification is because of all the questions that we've gotten about planning grants. So do keep the questions coming to us and we'll do our best. And if we can't answer it, we'll let you know. But if we see the same thing coming in a lot, that's when we realize that there's a point of clarification needed in these office hours. So we do appreciate the questions that you guys send in to us. It does help us to be more clear on what we're giving out to all the communities. And this is a critical point of it as we're coming up on the end. There will come a time when we will be unable to answer them. So the sooner the better. If you do have questions specific to what you're doing, send them over to the unit email. And we appreciate that folks have been doing that. Helps us provide better clarity to you too. So really thank you for your partnership on all of this. And we'll keep doing what we can to provide greater clarity.
We have a question and a hand raised. Paul, if you could please put your question in text into the Q&A box, that would be appreciated. Lori asks, I think a key item that Susan pointed out is that a complete set of plans is the trigger on the asterisk. Projects at times require a higher level of plans for feasibility is needed for environmental and design concerns. Estimates, a right of way reviews, and other items are needed to determine feasibility. This is what I understand. Susan?
Yep. Yeah, well stated, Lori. I think that is precisely what we've been trying to hammer down here. So I think that's a good synopsis for everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sorry, here I was talking and realizing that I was still on mute. Um, Thank you, Lori, for your summary. Yes, that is very much in line with what we are saying. Specifically, HUD states out that planning grants cannot be used for engineering, architectural, and design costs related to a specific project, including engineering specification, working drawing, and bid documents. So, yeah, it's very much in line with what you were saying. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. I don't think we have any more questions. Paul, Young, if you have, oh, Brandy. Brandy asks a question. Jeannie, can you put that into chat so I can get it out to my jurisdictions? You're muted, Jeannie, in case you're talking.
I am typing out here. So that what I just said can be found in our GMM chapter 2 under planning. I put the link to our chapter 2 in the chat. And Lacey, I will get you the link for the matrix code definitions and put it in the chat as well. Just give us a few minutes to grab that. Thank you.
And Paul Young has his hand up. So Paul, if you have specific question, please put it in the chat, or if we're not able to get to it today, you can always email our inbox and we'll try to get to it. All right, Jeannie put in those links that she said she would. So I'm gonna keep the webinar open for a few moments just so everyone can snag those up. All right. If there are no more questions, we can end the webinar a little early. Thank you for everyone for your attendance and participation. We really appreciate it. And have a happy holidays and a wonderful new year.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Thanks,
Happy holidays.
everyone. Happy holidays.